The lecture I prepared for you guys tonight is all about endgames and practical endgames, how to play different kinds of endgame positions, how to make the most of your possibilities, how to learn more about the endgame, and just some really practical advice is what I want to give you guys. The game I wanted to start with today, you can see right there, is a game I played here in the club a few months ago at the Bill Wright St. Louis Open. I'm playing white here. My opponent is the young Awonder Liang. Has anyone heard of this kid? Yeah, he's like 9 years old or maybe 10. He's a master. He's a very talented young player. So the position we have here is pretty equal. The material is even. Neither side has any obvious weaknesses, and it's kind of closed up. So I played rook g1. It's a really simple move. I just want to put my rook on the open file. He does the same thing. I played king e3. He played rook e8. So basically, if both sides just do nothing, the game's going to be a draw. There's no way for either side to really break through here as long as you don't do anything too crazy or risky. Both sides should be okay. I'm not going to take on g8 most likely because I don't want to give him the file, and he's not going to take on g1 because he doesn't want to give me control of the file either. So we're basically just kind of locked in here. No, don't worry about it. It's cool. But I did want to win this game, and I wouldn't be showing this game if we just agreed to a draw. Like, that wouldn't be it. So I played knight e4. I think I kind of have to play this move because black's knight on f6 is defending everything. It's a perfect piece, and my knight can't really do much of anything at all. Like knight a4, knight b6, and then what? Like there's nothing for my knight to attack. So I came up with one trick here, and my opponent, he just fell for it. He fell for it really hard, and I ended up winning this game. And the main lesson is that you should never relax. No matter how drawn or dead drawn you think the position is, there's always going to be tricks for one of the sides. So you should always keep your focus. I played knight e4, he took, I took. And here, if he just plays one move, a5, like we can probably agree to a draw here, or maybe black is even better. He can play a4, try to attack my b3 pawn, play rook b8 at some point. But most likely the game is going to be drawn. Neither side can really do a whole lot. But he played rook b8, which is a very natural move. He probably came up with the same idea, to play a5, a4, try to attack my pawns. But this move almost loses. I played rook g8, he took, and I played b4. This is my one trap in the position. And the point of this move is that I'm just trying to create a passed pawn. And because my king is closer to the center than his king, then this passed pawn is going to be really dangerous. So he played c takes b4. And this is probably not a good move. He should have done rook c8, just trying to defend this pawn. Then I'm going to play b5, creating a passed pawn. He should take, I take. He plays rook a8, attacking my a2 pawn. I play rook b1, takes, b6, rook a8, b7, rook b8, and h4. This is an important move to stop the king from coming into g5. And after, let's say, king g7, rook b6, white is much better here. I'm down a pawn, but my b pawn is very strong. I can always take on d6 and on e5 if I want to. And but it's not quite losing yet for black. Black can still fight on here. The game is not yet over. But this position is very, very good for white because my rook is very active. And once I take on d6 and I play king takes e5, I should have the better chances here. So that was black's best option. He played c takes b4, and I played c5. So that's my idea. I just want to break through, create a passed pawn, and win the game. So it takes, and d6. I can also play king takes e5 first, but I think d6 is more direct, so it's a better move. So white's plan here is pretty simple. King d5, d7, king d6, king e7, and queen. Or king takes e5, king f6, king e7, and I queen. But you know, it's kind of risky because I gave up 2 pawns, and now black has their own counterplay on the queen side. They have their own passed pawns. So this decision is kind of it's double-edged. If white miscalculates something or messes up here, then they could easily lose against these queenside pawns. So he played a5. There's some other lines here, but basically my idea going into all this was that even if black gets their queenside pawns down to like b2 and c2, I should have enough time to promote my d pawn and my f pawn. And I'll show you guys what I mean right here. So let's say rook d8. I'll take here. Well, this is if he just tries to defend against my pawns and plays king g7. I just go after his pawns, and if I can win his queenside pawns and keep my d6 pawn, of course white is just going to be easily winning. Let's say he plays c4. So I take the pawn, c3, d7, rook d8, king d6, a5. So it's important here not to rush with white. The game, it seems like it's completely winning, like I'm just going to win his rook next, but it's not so simple. Like king e7, rook b8, and king takes f7 is very important. If I just make a queen here, I'm sorry. He takes, I take, he plays a4. This is really not so easy because black's pawns are pretty dangerous here. You guys know, like if two pawns get to the 6th rank or the 3rd rank, a rook just can't stop them. Like they're too strong. I'll play here, c2, b3, and black wins. Black wins the game. So that's why it's important to first take this f7 pawn. So that once I win black's rook, I can also push my f pawn and make a queen. And it just works out. Like I was trying to calculate this during the game. I had a pretty good idea that it worked, but you know, it was pretty risky. So I'll play here. If black queens, I'll just take it and make a queen. So they have to play c2. So I'll queen. Black takes. I take. Queen. Queen, and it's made in probably 3 moves. King g5. Queen f6 mate, right? So this is the whole idea. This is the whole idea of b4. I break through, I make a pass pawn, I get a second pass pawn. Black gets counterplay, but white is just in time to queen. So this is kind of the point of this whole, this first position is that the first position we saw was completely drawn, just dead equal. And now things are crazy. So you can never relax during a chess game. If my opponent just played this a5 move earlier, not allowing me this b4 break, you know, we could have shaken hands right there. But now that the position has gotten so complicated, it's very easy to lose this with black. And indeed, it is a losing position. So he played a5 here. He just wants to get his pawns rolling. I took on e5, c4, king f6, a4. And here I played rook f4. This is actually a mistake. I should have just continued with the previous idea. Just king takes f7, promote both pawns, and mate the black king. But I figured rook f4 was just a simpler solution. I should mention we both only had like a few minutes here. So, you know, I was just looking for the easiest way to win. So I thought rook f4, I'm going to win one of these pawns. And then if my rook can contain black's queenside pawns, then I should be able to promote the pawn with my king, win black's rook, and win the game. So he played b3. I took here. He played rook g3. He should have played rook d8. This was his final chance. And this is the reason why my idea with rook f4 and taking one of these pawns is a mistake, because it gives black this last chance to save the game. So I play king e7. I got to keep this d6 pawn. Now he plays rook b8. He wants to promote. So rook a1 is the only move. b2, rook b1. And now rook b3. This is the key idea he had to find. Now his rook gets active, and it can give me these annoying checks along the 3rd rank. So I'll play d7, rook e3 check, and he goes back. If I play king e8, he'll give me checks. I basically can't promote the d pawn anymore. Eventually, I have to take this pawn. He'll take here. And I don't know. This position is close to winning for white, but it's not as winning as the position we saw before when white is just mating with a queen and rook. Right? So it still takes a little bit of work if I'm going to win this game. Fortunately for myself, in this position, I don't have to play d7. I can play this move f6. And if I had this position in the game, I'm not sure if I would find this move. Hopefully I would. But after this move f6, white is again winning. The two pawns are too strong. Something like this, f7, and the pawn promotes. So that was black's last chance. He had to find a way to activate his rook, like with this idea, rook b3 and rook e3 check. Instead, he played rook g3. But it's pretty much hopeless now because my pawn is too strong, and I found a way to just end the game immediately. I played rook a8, threatening checkmate on h8. He played king h7, and I played d7. So if black plays b2, I'll queen, he'll queen, and then queen h8 is mate. So I wanted to show that game again because I think it shows some really cool endgame principles. The first one is that the active king is pretty much the most important thing. The reason that all this worked for white is because my king is close to the center, close to this d pawn, and black's king is out of the game. And black just didn't have enough time to bring his king in. And because of that, it's like white's playing with an extra piece, and I'm able to promote my pawns and win the game. OK, so the second game I wanted to show here, I'm playing black. I've got two pieces versus a rook and pawn. And well, let's open it up a bit. Like, what do you guys know about these kinds of positions when you have two pieces versus a rook, or a rook versus two pieces? Who knows any kind of principles or ideas? What's the most important thing in these kinds of positions? Go for it.
Stay off the same file. Don't open yourself up to skewers.
Yeah, if you're the side with the rooks, you got to be really careful because knights give fork and bishops also give double attack. So I guess one thing you could say is like keep your rooks on the light square so you don't get forked by the bishop. Another important thing is that actually activity is just the most important thing. Whichever side is the more active pieces is probably the stronger side, and they have good winning chances. If both rooks were on the 7th rank and really active and white could push their a pawn down the board, black would be in serious trouble. And conversely, if black's rook got really active and was able to create threats against white's pawns and king, then black would be on top. So whenever you're playing these kinds of positions, you need to care less about material and more about how active your pieces are and whether you can actually create threats. So in this position, the best move for black would have been rook a8. I don't let this a pawn advance. I'm going to play maybe rook a3 next. I activate my rook, and it's pretty similar to what happened in the game, but black is doing really well here. All my pieces are super active. But I made a mistake here. I played rook c8, attacking this pawn. And here I assumed that white should defend this pawn with a move like rook b4. And my opponent made the same assumption, and he played rook b4. But this is a pretty terrible mistake. The best move here is a4. White has to give up this pawn, play rook a2, and now white's a pawn is pretty dangerous, and black has to find a way to defend against this pawn with their pieces. So like, I have to maybe move my rook back and do something like this. So I'm able to stop the pawn, but no, this position is really unclear because white's rooks are active, the pawn is always dangerous, and black can't really do anything without allowing this pawn to pass through. So this is what my opponent should have done, and if he found all these moves, the game would probably be drawn. The thing is, like, neither side can really do anything. White can always try to create threats with his rooks. For instance, rook c2 is one idea here, pinning my knight to my rook, and black always has to watch out for this a pawn. So this would have been a really tricky position to play. As it happened, my opponent assumed he had to defend this pawn, and he played rook b4. So I played knight f5, threatening knight e3 check, and knight takes c4, rook e2. I attacked his rook, and now his rook is on the a4 square, and this is just this is probably like the worst position for the rook. It's blocking its own pawn, and it's incredibly passive. Like, you couldn't pick a worse square for this rook to be on the board. So I think black is already doing really, really well. So I play bishop d4, rook e4, bishop c5. And this is kind of a perfect position for black here. Both pieces are in really good squares. The knight is controlling all the squares in the center. The bishop is controlling some important diagonals. And what's really important is that both pieces are defended. They're on outposts. What this means is that my rook is now free to do whatever it wants, and white can't attack either of these pieces. If they play a move like g4 attacking my knight, it won't be the end of the world, because my knight will always have the d4 square or the e3 square. But meanwhile, white is making more weaknesses on the king side, and that's not something that they really want to do. So I think this is like an ideal position for black when you have two pieces versus the rook. You want to just find really good squares for your pieces where they can't be attacked and they're contributing to controlling, the whole board. So my opponent played rook a5. Black's next move is just going to be like rook b8, rook b2, start attacking white's king and start messing with white's position here. The thing is that black is basically up a piece. I have 3 pieces, white has 2 pieces. So whatever I attack, I'm probably going to win if I can coordinate all my pieces. Because of that, this position is really difficult for white. So rook a5, rook b8, rook b5, and of course, rook a8. When you've got 2 pieces versus a rook, and you also have a rook of your own, it's really rare that you're going to want to trade rooks in this position. I want to keep a rook because I need a piece that can move up and down and left and right. And this is a good way to continue. Just play rook a8, don't trade rooks. So rook b2 and rook a3. I actually could have won the game immediately here. I could have played knight e3 check. And if the king moves to h1, I play knight d1. So I attack the rook, and I'm threatening knight f2 check, winning the exchange. And then I'd be up a piece. But I missed this. It's kind of, you don't often play knight d1 in a game, and it's a winning move. So I wasn't really looking for it. Instead, I just played rook a3. I figured I would just win the game slowly. Just activate my pieces, start attacking white's pawns, and the game is probably going to be over soon. So he played f4. I played rook c3. He played a4. I could play rook a3 here to attack this pawn, but then he's going to play rook e8 check and rook a8. And then he's going to start pushing his pawn a5, a6, a7. And I feel like I don't have to really deal with this. I can just start attacking him, and my attack should come faster. So after a4, I just played h4. I'm threatening to take on g3. And if white plays g4 here, I'm going to play knight e3 check and take one of white's pawns. So he played rook a2. Only now my opponent realized that he has to start creating threats at any cost. So he plays this move rook a2 to start pushing his a pawn. He wants to play a5, a6, and queen. It's kind of too late now. Now all my pieces are super active. They're perfectly placed. And my threats just come in first to the white king. So he should have, of course, played this move a4 way back when, before any of my pieces were coordinated. So now it's just too late. So I take. I took with the knight. a5. So now this position's a little bit tricky for black, because if I don't, create some serious threat to white's king soon, he's going to queen his pawn. So I found a good move here. I found knight h5. The point is I want to take this pawn on f4 with check, and then my pieces are going to be really well coordinated to attack white's king. He just doesn't have enough time. Like if a6, I'll take here. And as you can see, the king's kind of running out of squares. Like king h1, check, and back. And I at least win this pawn, or I give mate on the 8th rank. Or if king f1, I can play rook h3, and then check, and I win the rook. But what I wanted to point out to you guys is that even if I don't have all these mating patterns with the rook, knight, and bishop, if I just play a position like this, rook takes c4, for instance, a7, and I just give up my bishop, with a knight and 3 pawns for the rook, it's just a winning endgame. I mean, it's a pretty simple win, even if we trade rooks, because knight and 3 pawns is just too much. There's no way the rook can contain all the extra material. So you always want to keep this in the back of your head. It's kind of like a plan B. Going into all this, when I thought about this move, h4, I was thinking that once I win all of white's pawns, is that even if I don't find some checkmate or a way to win white's rook, at the very least, I can give up my bishop and I'll have a knight and 3 pawns versus a rook, and that'll be an endgame I can just win. It'll take 20, 25 more moves, but I'm sure I can win it. So you always want to have this in the back of your head, like a plan B, knowing that you can always go into the safe position with a winning material advantage. As it happened, I do have enough counterplay here to just cause a lot of grief to white's king. So I was able to just calculate pretty accurately and find some good moves here. I played f5 to attack white's rook, check, rook h7, and I played rook g3 check. Kind of a funny line here is I can also just play knight takes f4 and just g5. This was good enough for a win. The point is that white's king is in a mating net, and white's just not in time to do anything, just g3 check and rook c1 mate. So I could have gone for this as well. I decided to play rook g3 check, king h2, rook g4. I came up with this threat to play rook h4 check, and then the king moves, then I play knight takes f4, and then I win white's rook. So I figured this was good enough for the win. And it was a6, check, check. I take here, and the game is basically over. If white played rook b7, for instance, to get out of this threat, I have a really cool mate here. I just give check, 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 and that's mate. So the point of this position, of course, was to show you guys some important principles about playing 2 pieces versus a rook. The most important thing, of course, is to get your pieces on good active squares and try to create threats with your rook and bishop and knight. And for the side that's playing with the extra rook, of course, you need to realize that once black coordinates their pieces really well, you're going to be in big trouble. So after rook c8 here, of course, my opponent should play a4 and immediately go for this counterplay with the a pawn. And black's just not ready to do anything to white's king yet, as you can see. So cool. Any questions on that? Anything I've talked about so far? All right, sweet. Yeah.
But I guess it's better to get rid of pawn first. Otherwise, after taking moves, probably it's not very good. Not as good as.
Did you say knight f4?
Knight fork.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That happened right here. Yeah, this could have just ended the game immediately. Knight gives check, king has to move either to h3 or h1, then knight d1, and I'm just going to have an extra bishop. This would have been the simplest way to win, of course, but then we wouldn't have seen the rest of the wonderful game. So what can you do?
See a win from that position?
Oh, I'm sorry. The point is that black is going to play knight f2 check next, no matter what, forking the king and the rook on e4. And I'm also attacking the rook on b2. So no matter where this rook goes, I'm going to play knight f2 check and win the rook on e4. And then the extra bishop, all of white's pawns are separated and weak. Should be no problems for black to win that game. Cool. Anything else? Great.
After the battle, there's not.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you find that solution? That the black rook is on the top of the C3 there.
Yeah.
And then you play a pawn trying to get rid of those pawns. But here, if you play that rook takes c4.
Yeah, you want to take this pawn and then win back the rook with this check, right?
But I guess it's not good time to trade the rooks, right?
Well, this position is probably winning for black because white's pawn is only on a4, and I can bring my king in, and I can probably win this pawn. But I feel like it'll just take a long time. But I think this is winning too. Just out of principle, I don't really want to trade rooks, just to make things easier for myself. As pretty sure after h4, I can create all these threats against white's king, and it should be good. I can also play knight e3 check here, and just take this pawn like that. But here I figured I'd rather just have my knight on the king side attacking white's king, rather than go for this pawn. So this is actually another game I played in the club here. I'm playing black, and the position looks pretty normal, even material. The only difference here is that black has 2 bishops versus a bishop and knight, and this is actually a pretty sizable advantage or perk of the position. It's really good to have 2 bishops in a very simplified endgame like this. The center is open. Both bishops have these nice diagonals that they can work with, and having the 2 bishops is definitely an advantage in this kind of position. So I wanted to show you guys this game because I think that it can be really useful to see how to use the 2 bishops and sort of win an endgame that looks kind of equal and pretty close to being drawn. So the first thing I did here was I traded this rook off. I figured both of white's rooks look really nice in the center, so whenever your opponent's pieces are better than yours, then you always want to trade them off. Now that white has 1 rook, that's not as much pressure in the center. So I just play bishop e6 here. So white's rook is developed, mine isn't, but it's really not a big deal. There's nothing that the white rook can really do. And my rook can get into the game next. So my opponent played rook d1, I played bishop e5, g3. This is kind of an interesting move by my opponent. He's basically trying to get me to take this knight on c3 and double his pawns. And black could do this. I can double the pawns and try to win this endgame because white's pawns are weak. Maybe bring my king to the queen side and try to win here. But I figured it would be better to just keep my bishop. Because a position like this, it's very good for black, but it's probably not winning if white defends really accurately. For instance, they can play a move like c5, and then rook b1, and attack my b7 pawn. And if I trade a pawn or 2 and the material remains equal, then it's going to be really hard for black to win. I'd rather just keep my powerful dark-scored bishop on the board, because this bishop is going to control the queen side and the king side, and it's going to be very hard for white to deal with this bishop because they don't have a dark-scored bishop to sort of counteract its power. So I played g5. Well, I played g3. They want to play f4 and gain some space, so I just played g5 to stop them from this advance. Yeah, go for it.
Instead of playing the bishop to e5 there, what about putting the rook to d1? Why wouldn't you want to challenge there, maybe trade off the rook? Are you trying to keep the rook for another reason? Or?
No, that's a great question. I could play this move. I just, this is a perfectly fine move. Eventually, I ended up trading rooks like this. I just wanted to keep rooks on the board for now because I figured keeping the rooks on can't possibly hurt me. Like if I get my rook really active with the 2 bishops, it should be a really powerful piece. If I can't make any progress, then I'll trade rooks and play that position. So here I'm not sure yet whether I can win this game or not. After playing this game out, now I know it's not that difficult for me to win this position. Back then I wasn't sure if I should keep the rooks on or off. So I figured I'll keep the rook on, keep things flexible. Then if white's rook is super active or it's stopping me from making any more progress, I'll trade rooks and then play that position. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. And for the moment, white's rook can't come to my 7th rank. It really can't create any threats here. So I should be OK. So g3, g5, f3. My opponent just wants to get his king to the center of the board, which is a good idea. Play king f8. And here I just play b6. I can trade rooks again, and this is probably good enough for the win because my king is very close to the queen side. I just want to bring my king to like, a4 if he'll let me, and just go after white's pawns. Probably white will play b4, but then I'll attack white's pawns with my bishops, and it should be good enough for the win. But here I just played b6 just to control this square on c5 and just keep everything under control. The thing about playing these positions where you're slightly better, you have the 2 bishops, or you have some other very small advantage, is that you just want to keep things under control. You don't have to win the game right away. Just take your time. Don't give your opponent any chances. Try to restrict all his pieces, including their knights, and then eventually you can improve your position slowly, and eventually you'll win the game. So I played b6. My next move is just going to be f5 to gain even more space. b3, f5, and here I can play a5 and try to tickle these pawns here, create a weakness. But I figured I might as well just play rook d8 now. I think my pawns on the king side look good. My king is closer to the queen side, and if I trade rooks, it should be a pretty easy win. So he plays rook d3. This is a good move. He says that if we're going to trade rooks, then at least he'll get his knight to d3, or he'll get his bishop out. So I just played a5 because I'm not forced to trade rooks either, so I can improve my position. He plays a4, and I played rook d4. So I'm just refusing to trade rooks. If he wants to trade rooks, that's great. I'll get my bishop to d4. But for the moment, I'm ready to play king d6, king c5, king b4, and go after his queenside pawns. This is like one of the main advantages of the 2 bishops. You just control all the squares. The dark squared bishop is such a strong piece in this position that white's really in some serious trouble. So he played king g2, king d6, and here finally white has nothing to do here. He just has to trade rooks. So I took, and he played knight d3, and here I played b5. So the point of b5 is to break through. Actually, after this move, my opponent just resigned. He didn't really want to play anymore. Which is kind of strange because the material is even, and it looks like white should just play on, right? I mean, I would play on in this position. But it's actually not such a strange decision if you sort of just look at all the lines that are possible. For instance, if white take this pawn, and I take, and they take, and I take on b3, black's a pawn is just going to queen. There's nothing white's bishop, knight, or king can do about this pawn. Like let's say knight c1, bishop d5, and there's just nothing here. a4, a3, a2. I'm going to win a piece, and with an extra piece, I'll win the game, of course. So white can't take on b5. He can move his knight, like knight e1, but then I'll attack his knight. And if king f2, I saw this during the game, I can even trade my bishop off and win this c4 pawn. So as you can see, I'm only willing to trade my bishop if I get some tangible advantage. Here, of course, I'm winning the c4 pawn. I'm probably going to win the a4 pawn. My king is so much more active that I don't need the 2 bishops anymore to win this game. And trading the bishop off just makes things simpler. I take on c4 next, I'll take on a4, and it's a winning game. If they keep their knight, pretty much the same thing. King c5, and I'm just winning the c4 pawn. So my opponent, to his credit, after this move b5, he just didn't see a way to really continue the game. He saw all these lines. He realized that black only has to play like 2 more good moves, and the game is over, and he resigned. So are there any questions on that? Who would resign in this position?
I'm not good enough to know how much trouble I would be in.
That's the thing. A good rule of thumb is, if you were to switch sides and you could win the position against anybody in the world with no trouble, then you should resign. If you don't see how your opponent is going to win, then make him show you, and you'll learn something. So whenever I'm busted against a grandmaster, I want to resign and like show him some respect, but I also just want to play on to see how he would win that position. Because if we were to switch sides, I'm not sure I could beat him. But then they beat me, and then I learn a thing or two about converting, like these end games. But in all honesty, the game is pretty much won here, and there's just no tricks left here for white. Even though knight is such a tricky piece, there's just nothing that white can really do. Black brings their king in, and they win their queenside pawns. Okay, cool. Well, I have one final position for you guys. So again, I'm playing black here, and actually, let me just give you guys a moment to try to figure out what's going on here, because it's a pretty complicated position. So black has got this pawn on c2. This is a pretty strong pawn, and white's in pretty big trouble here. Fortunately for them, the pawn is blockaded. There's no way black can immediately promote the pawn or attack white's bishop enough times to make it move away and then promote a pawn. So black still has a lot of work to do before they win this game. Yeah, so let's just go on with the game. I played knight a4. My idea is to play knight c3 and then knight a2 attacking the bishop, or maybe even knight d1 blocking the rook from controlling c1 and win the game that way. And I'm also just improving my knight. So he plays knight b4 and knight c3. So can anyone see why white can't take this pawn on c2? Yeah, so which move is that?
For black?
Yeah, so white plays knight takes c2.
Right, and knight to b2.
A2, I think someone said it. But yeah, you got the right idea. So knight takes c2, knight a2, and I'm attacking white's knight, and white's bishop is lost on c1. So it's actually not a huge deal. It's like one simple trick. But a lot of times when I play these endgames, I forget to look at very simple things like that. And maybe I'll even reject a move like knight c3 because my pawn is hanging, and then I'll just forget about it. But just because it's an endgame, you should always look for little tricks to help your position. So knight c3, he played king f1, knight d1, and he played knight a2. Like if he takes this pawn, I just take, and then I win the piece. So that would be a pretty easy win. So he played knight a2, and I played rook a4. I could also just take the bishop right away and play rook c3. So the idea here is that the c2 pawn is not going to win the game for me immediately, but it's going to sort of tie up all of white's pieces that my rook and knight can start attacking white's other pawns. If anyone has heard of the principle of two weaknesses, this is pretty much what's going on at play here. White has to defend against the c2 pawn, make sure it doesn't promote, and meanwhile, black's rook and knight are just going to attack all of white's pawns, which are practically defenseless. So a position like this would be very close to winning for black. Instead, I just played rook a4. I'm just attacking the a3 pawn in a different way. I just want to take on c1 and then take on a3. So king e2. There's really not a whole lot white can do here. He just wants to bring his king in and try to defend that way. So I took on c1, and I took on a3. And I played rook c3 here. So black won a pawn, but the position is actually not that simple yet. My pieces they look weird, and they are, because they're just uncoordinated. Like the knight on d1, it's a strange piece, and the rook is, for now, just protecting the c2 pawn. So rook e2, I play king f7. This is just a waiting move because white doesn't have any useful moves. And that's something you guys should try to remember for the endgame. It's like you have this advantage, you have the c2 pawn. White has no passed pawns, they have no active pieces, they have no counterplay. You can make a safe move like king f7 and just to pass the move to your opponent. A lot of times they'll just blunder something because they don't have anything to do. That's actually what happened right here. He played knight a2 and knight b4, which is a blunder, but we'll look at that. In case of knight c1, I think this move g5 is actually really good. The point is that I'm just fixing white's pawn on h3. And white still has nothing to do, but eventually what's going to happen is I'll play something like d4, and maybe they'll take, and then I'll take on f3, and then I'll take on h3. For instance, or if they take the pawn, I can play knight takes e3, knight c4, and white's pawns on the king side are just going to fall. So that's the second way of winning this game. The first way is to try and promote your pawn using your two pieces. The second way is to just give up this pawn, but in the meantime you win all of white's other pawns. As it happened, my opponent played knight b4, which is a blunder. Can anyone see how black can win in this position? So rook takes e3. And then what if knight takes c2? Well, you can just trade rooks, and then you have an extra pawn. And you have a knight endgame, and it should be winning. That's definitely good enough. But knight takes e3 is even better, with the same idea. The point is that white's king has to protect the c1 square, so it's not really defending the c3 pawn. If white plays rook takes e3, I'll take the rook, and then the king can't recapture because I queen. But good job. That's exactly right. The other point here is that if knight takes c2, I'll take, and I'll trade. And this endgame is pretty easily winning. Or if I'm not too confident about my king and pawn endgames, I'll just take this pawn and that pawn, and the game will be over anyways. So my opponent played rook e1. And here it's very important not to relax, because you have two extra pawns, but you got to stay focused till the end of the game. Until the clock is stopped, you just can't let your opponent off the hook. So you got to play just what you believe to be the best moves, and don't let him off the hook. So d4, he played knight c6, and I can play rook a4 here, defending the pawn, but I figured that with my rook, knight, and two pawns, I probably have some winning combination here, a way to promote the pawn or do something pretty strong. So I was able to find it. I just played knight c4 check, king takes, and rook c3 check. So if the king moves to b1, I'll play knight d2 check, and I win the knight. And if king d1, then knight b2 check, of course, and I win the knight. So seeing that, my opponent, of course, resigned. So the point of that position was to show you guys that even though you have this really strong pawn on c2, you always need to look for possible tactics like knight takes e3. But if your opponent doesn't let you do anything, if they defend really solidly, then you have to look for a way to create more weaknesses in their position or go after the other weaknesses in their position. In this case, the h3 pawn. So white here really has nothing to do. They take the pawn, I win the e3 pawn, and then my rook and knight are incredibly active, and white's king is now misplaced on the queen side because it was dealing with the c pawn, and black's pieces just take all of white's pawns on the king side. And then we're all set. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys stay for the next lecture. It starts pretty soon. And I'll see you guys soon. Take care.